So reducing the costs to run your e-commerce business is one of the three parts to creating profit and increasing the value of your business, which is a big part of what we care about. And so it's not a subject that's often discussed, since the headlines like to show revenue growth, not cost reduction, right? And by the way, we do go into revenue growth in another and many other guides, which we'll link to below. But the truth is that cost cutting is not really the mentality of growth. It's not super sexy. And if you look at it the wrong way, it's a bad thing. You have to look at how to create massive efficiencies rather than cutting costs. Think about how you create massive efficiencies that reduce the cost to run your business over time while increasing your revenue over time. And so today we're going to show you the top 3 ways to lean out the 3 biggest areas of expense in your e-commerce business. Let's go. Okay, before we get into costs, let's talk about the reverse way that you need to look at your e-commerce business, and that is profit first. Most people put profit last, right? It's the bottom line, not the top line. And we flip that. Looking at profit first is how you create a successful and valuable business. An e-commerce business should be at least 23% net profit and growing from there. If you want to have enough to invest into the future and increase those profits, this is required. We like to actually see 30% or closer to 30%. Anything below 15% is what I would consider unhealthy and unstable. And do you even know where you sit? And are you tracking net profit? And by the way, this is net profit. That means after everything. It's also known as SDE, seller discretionary earnings. It's also known as EBITDA, but it's essentially the bottom line. And if you want to increase your business value, then this is the main thing to look at. And so what is profit first? It's this idea that we take the profit out first, I know, revolutionary, as if it were a tax, right? As if it were not even available to your business. And then we work with the rest, and rather than profit just ending up where it ends up. And it's based on this idea that a business will consume however much you give it, as small or as little as or as large as you give it. And so we get deep into this concept of profit first in other guides, but the basic idea or the basic equation that you can use is 30-20-50, and that being 30% profit, 20% operating expenses, marketing and human resources, etc., and then 50% cost of goods. So that's your product, that's your inventory, that's what it costs to make it. Every business is different, but you should know what the makeup is for you, and maybe that 3-area split is helpful for you. The business will consume whatever you give it, less or more. And so take the profit out first. Now that we understand that concept, let's go ahead and jump into the 3 top areas of expense and how to reduce those in an e-commerce business. Okay, so number 1, how to reduce your marketing spend. So marketing is typically the highest expense for an e-commerce business. And while you don't want to cut marketing because it's the lifeblood of your sales, you never want to just cut marketing. You do need it to be very efficient, and you want it to become more efficient over time. So here are 3 ways to create more efficiency in your marketing spend. Number 1, focus on owned channels, aka email and SMS. And so we talk about owned channels versus unowned channels and what that means in other places, which we can link to. But essentially, owned channels are channels where you own the land. Someone can't shut you down. You don't have to pay every time you send something. That's an owned channel. It's a list, and essentially email, direct mail, and phone are really the only 3 owned channels. And email is one of the most fruitful. It's the best one. According to HubSpot, email has a 36x ROI, and so that's $36 for every $1 you spend, versus if you take pay-per-click, right, you're talking about most good ROAS is 2 to 4x, right? And sometimes you can get higher, but it's a very different return. And so that doesn't mean you shouldn't do pay-per-click, but 30% or more of your sales should be coming from email. And if they're not, then that's the opportunity. You really need to get more sales through email. And so we actually have a guide on how to install a revenue generating email system into your business, into your e-commerce business that you can grab, and we'll link to below. It's at a ridiculous price right now for a limited time. But essentially, number one is focusing on own channels, and that's specifically email. That's the biggest lever that you have. The second one is maximize unpaid and paid traffic. And so all traffic, you want to maximize that. We talk about this idea of an efficient traffic flow, which we can link to. We have some guides and even a nice flow chart. But the efficient e-commerce traffic flow, what that should look like, we talk about that elsewhere. But you need to have this full funnel approach where you're bringing in traffic, and sometimes you're paying for it. You're actually paying for it everywhere. It just depends on if it's direct cost or an indirect cost. So you're paying to bring in these people, and we want to make the most out of them. And so we want to make sure that we're following up with all the other technologies that we have. So that means you need to be retargeting. You need to be transitioning people as quickly as possible to email, even before the sale, especially before the sale, to maximize your follow-up. Since we know most people will not buy your product the first time. Most people won't buy your product even the second time. So you have to follow up over and over again. And so number two is maximizing traffic. Number three is bring in an expert. And so oftentimes to maximize your marketing spend, it takes deep knowledge and experience in various areas and various industries and different brands, and to leverage that and to create efficiencies in your business. And so it's very hard to do that when you're doing everything else, and your business may not be a marketing business, it's a product business. And so one idea is to bring in an expert, something like we do that, Metacake does that. There are other experts out there that really know e-commerce, that look at lots of different brands, that spend lots of money across a lot of different brands and the different ad platforms and all the different channels. Bring them in and help them guide you in creating efficiencies and sophistication in all these places. All right, so number one, how to reduce your marketing spend. That's the number one cost center. Number two, the second cost center is inventory. And so let's talk about how to reduce inventory cost. This is cost of goods. And so inventory is a massive expense, and one that will not go away unless you're a digital product. And even then, there's still costs to creating that. And so we go into supply chain and forecasting pretty deep in other places that we're not going to get into here. But let's really quickly get into the top two ways to reduce inventory costs. Number one is forecasting. And this includes primarily not overpaying for freight charges, understanding how much demand there is for your product, how much people will consume, how much you're going to sell, and then planning ahead enough so that you can get it to you efficiently. So assuming that you make your product, that means talking to the manufacturer, that means giving them enough lead time, that means all the things so that you're not overpaying for speed. All right. That is what forecasting is about. And that's true even if you don't manufacture, whether or not you buy from suppliers or not. Forecasting is a huge lever, because the faster you need it and the more that you hold in your inventory that's not sold, the poorer your cash flow, the more expensive your inventory becomes. And so forecasting is number one. Number two, margins. And so we talk about margins being one of those gold multipliers, right? One of those key levers in e-commerce, like your gross margin, everything flows from that. And so we like to see a 5x minimum gross margin in a product. And we actually like to really see something like 30x or more in your product. That's where you can really be successful. And that may sound like a lot, but it's really not, because that is how you pay for the rising cost of acquisition of a new customer. That's how you invest in R&D and some of these critical ways to actually grow your business in healthy ways. And so margin is critical. If you don't have this, it's really hard to build a successful business. And so if your current products are low margin, look at increasing that through increasing your prices or through bringing in higher margin products over time. All right, so that's the second cost center, is inventory. The third cost center is shipping. And so let's talk about how we reduce our shipping costs. And so shipping is obviously a massive part of e-commerce, right? It's essential in almost every e-commerce business unless you're a digital product. And so thus the costs associated with shipping can get quickly out of hand. And so we like to have a few rules for reducing shipping costs. Number one, deal in lightweight and easy to ship and low breakage products wherever you can. And so if you're looking at expanding your product line, if you're looking at how to improve your products, when we look at businesses that we're potentially acquiring or consulting with, ideally it's lightweight, easy to ship, low breakage. Now, it doesn't mean that you can't be in heavier, more complex shipping products. You have to think more about the model. You have to make sure that your costs are not getting out of hand in the shipping area specifically, and that you can actually really serve customers well, doing warranties and support and all that kind of stuff without going out of business. So that's number one. Number two is the unboxing experience. And so we talk a lot about how important unboxing is, and I'll link to all those guys. But the key here is that you don't overspend on the supplies and the packaging related to your products. If you do, then you're just wasting money, right? And so have a great unboxing experience, but be efficient and reduce unnecessary waste wherever possible. Packaging material is actually like your product. It requires lead times. It requires design. It requires manufacturing, all these different things. And so the forecasting and some of the other things we've talked about actually go into your packaging as well. So make sure that your packaging is not more than the price of your product. I've seen businesses where the packaging sometimes is more than the cost actually to create, or equal to the cost to actually create the product. And that may not be a smart thing for your business if that's the case. Number three, build the cost of shipping into your pricing. And so we talk a lot about the psychology of shipping and how to price shipping appropriately. Customers really hate, or generally don't like, paying for shipping. Amazon, a few other brands have just kind of made it so that people assume that shipping is free, and fast shipping is important as well. And so building the cost of shipping into your pricing is great. Charging for shipping wherever you can is actually really good as well, because it can be actually a revenue generator. But you might want to consider subsidizing some of your shipping in your product pricing. I think the point here is don't lose money on shipping, okay? Make sure that you're either covering it in your product, or you're charging enough for it in a way that's not reducing your conversion rate. Don't lose money on shipping costs. I've got a bonus. Number four, how to reduce your HR expenses. This is another big cost center for e-commerce businesses. The only other one is human resources. And so the number one way is outsourcing anything that isn't your core business expertise, right? So you're in the business of creating expertise in a specific product for a specific problem of which that product is a solution to, right? You may not be in the business of marketing or technology or accounting and forecasting and some of these other things. And so bringing in outside experts, we talk about how to blend outside experts like agencies, full outsourced versus hybrid versus all internal teams, how to blend that in the appropriate way. We can link to that guide, but that's a critical part. And that's why a growth team like us exists, is to give advice and leadership and outside expertise to companies in our area that may not be your area. So that's number one, how to reduce your HR expenses rather than spending a ton on really high experienced people that aren't core to your business. Potentially outsource some of those. Number two, leverage technology in places so that humans can be efficient in doing the work that only humans should do and can do. So you want humans doing your highest value things, right? And so the customer service touch points where you're talking to customers and emailing, that's humans. But what leads someone up to that place, leverage technology. And there are a whole bunch of other areas in your business that you can do that as well, through email and automation and things like that. So you're not wasting resources, human resources, on things that technology can do, and you're using them to create a lot of value for your company. And then lastly, having dialed in SOPs, standard operating procedures. These are the things that run your business. Your business runs on systems and processes, and the humans are only there to manage the systems and processes. And so we actually dig deep on all the types of e-commerce SOPs and how to create them and what they should be in other articles that I will link to as well. But that is another way to reduce HR expenses, because it reduces inefficiency in your teams. All right, so cost reduction is not really a fun topic unless you're kind of an accountant or a CFO, no offense. But the key is not cutting costs and slowing momentum, right? It's not being in a mindset of scarcity, but it's being in a mindset of efficiency and growth oriented, so that you can create maximum fuel for your business through the expenses that you actually have. If you're a 6 to 9 figure business and you're looking to implement these types of strategies to grow your revenue in healthy and profitable ways, go to metacake.com and we'd love to help. Thanks, and never stop growing.